Okay, every day we sign contracts. We may not always be aware of them, but we do. The Fox 5i team's Dana Fowle says that most of the time we don't even bother to read them, which we don't. Dana, good morning.
I got to tell you, every time you download an app, every time you pay for something online, every time you update your iTunes software, you're signing a contract. Now, a lot of times it doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. Sometimes it's obvious. You buy a car, you sign a contract. You rent an apartment, you sign a contract. Those you probably read. But more reflexively, all day long at the keyboard, you do this. You hit accept on what's called an end-user licensing agreement. Sometimes it's called a shrink wrap or click wrap agreement. It's the only way you can use their product. And as we found out when we stopped some students, most people don't read them. This is the PayPal agreement.
This is crazy. How many trees do you think they had to take down for this?
Good question. It's 47 pages plus dozens of links to read.
This would take a while to read. Nobody has time for that.
You know, sometimes they're just quirky. Take this iTunes end-user agreement. In part, it says this. I'm going to read it to you. You also agree that you will not use these products for any purpose prohibited by United States law, including without limitation, development, design, manufacture, or production of nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons.
That's a little intense.
Development, design, manufacture, and production of nuclear, missile, or chemical or biological weapons.
Is it being used for that? Like, is that your master plan for iTunes?
I guess they thwarted it.
Okie dokie. And sometimes they're funny. Take this fine print from an old video store receipt that this law professor uses as a class example in contract law.
I hereby surrender my soul for all eternity to the clerks at I Love Video and agree to become part of their legion of zombies.
Robert Adia, a contract lawyer and Emory University law professor, says even the most conscientious of us sign off without reading contracts. And there's a name for it. It's called rational ignorance.
The odds that something goes wrong is then, meanwhile, relatively low. And so as a result, it is in some ways rational to remain ignorant until, of course, the thing goes wrong.
Here's a Google end-user contract. Listen into this one, though. It's a little bit scary.
You give Google a perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, royalty-free, and non-exclusive license to reproduce, adapt, modify, translate, publish, publicly perform, publicly display, and distribute any content which you submit, post, or display on or through the services.
That's everything you do on that web browser. Email, pictures, all of it. Most end-user contracts aren't like that, but many do take a bite out of your privacy. I know I have tons of photography apps. They're loaded with personal pictures. My personal pictures, right? Well, sort of.
But my guess is all the photos that you put on there, they are entirely free to do whatever they want with. Many of those have the full rights to use your photographs for commercial purposes without your consent and so on and so forth.
They can, but he says they probably won't. A number of years back, a company called PC Pit Stop gave away $1,000 to the first person who read about free money in the fine print. It reportedly took 3,000 sales and 5 months for somebody to notice. And while it's, fun to be flip about these end-user agreements, there are some contracts you should always, 100% every single time, read. Contracts or agreements that involve your employment, warranties, personal finance, or medical issues. Always be on the lookout for clauses that take away your right to remedy if something goes wrong.
Once in a while, you'll run into a provision that speaks to the need to litigate any dispute in California or under the law of Nevada, or you have to subject yourself to mandatory arbitration, or you can't participate in a class action.
One of the most famous contract stories is about the band Van Halen. They had a clause in their contracts that said no brown M&Ms could be in the backstage area, and if they found brown M&Ms, they would cancel the show, and it would be at the promoter's expense. It wasn't because they were being obnoxious rock stars. They had such a massive sound and stage system that if not put together in a very precise way, it could actually be dangerous to them and the crowd. So that's how they knew if the promoters read the contract with their very specific instructions, because buried in there was the clause, no brown M&Ms.
Okay, that's hilarious. I did
It's
not
fantastic.
know that. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great idea. Okay,
Yeah.
so you don't have to, you know, I don't know, if it's a new app or something, you might not read the contract, but if it's buying a house, a car, you're having surgery, you have to.
Yeah, and we want to reiterate this. If it's a situation where something could go wrong and would be very costly to you, then you've got to make sure the contract indicates that you will be able to get a remedy.
This is so interesting.
I know. It makes you want to read
goodness.
these end user agreements now because they're kind of funny.
Yeah, and that PayPal agreement, 40-something pages.
Oh, and that doesn't count the links buried in there. It's probably hundreds.
Wow, worth taking a look at. Love this.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
interesting. Dana, thank you.